It's a curious case of three entities. One being the clock that was ticking by, and the other was God Himself was present, and another entity or the person was the human itself present along with God and the time. Now, the question arises here is now the human is, the going to value the words of, you know, God. God is, bestowing the human with whatever blessings, whatever things is, need to be done, and the clock is also ticking by. Now the human, he is supposed to be, what is the situation that the human has to undergo, what will be the outcome, what is the importance that the human will give to. There is a clock that is ticking by. As a clock ticks by, his lifespan too is shortened, and other side God Himself is there in His presence, and He is bestowing upon the human all the blessings. Now what is this scenario? How do you interpret this scenario to a beautiful, into a beautiful scenario where you value the most? For example, now God is Himself bestowing all the blessings, and the clock is ticking by. Now, will He count the clock as it ticks by, as it no, as a time passes by? Is He going to value the time, or the time with God itself, who is bestowing Him with all the goodness and all the blessings? Will he count the blessings of the God, or will he count the clock itself? So here the human is in a fix whether he needs to think about the clock that ticks by as each second, each minute, each hour passes by, his life is shortened. But in the other, this one other side, God Himself is present. So God's presence is there. The time, He should be, the essence of time should be there in the human's mind. But what will he value in this scenario? So the answer is simple. See, will he count the blessings, or will he count the time? So simple is, see, what is that the time as it passes by, what does it lead to? Ultimately, you leave the body, and your spirit or the soul or the Atma is becoming one with God. Now, I hear that is the inference of time. As you, everyone's time is ticking by, every second, every minute, every hour, his life is shortened. But we think we're going to live forever. So we are not bothered about the time that we value for our life. Life itself is shortened every second. So now here God is presence, God's presence is there, God is blessing us. So ultimately we have to value His blessings, count the blessings of the God, because ultimately when the time stops, you are going to be earning, or you are going to be, in search of God's blessings at the right moment, at the last moment. So at the last moment, you don't need anything but God's blessings. But here, God is Himself present and bestowing all the blessings. So simply, you value the time with God, because ultimately you're going to meet in the end, or whenever you are being enlightened, whenever you value the presence of that happiness of enlightenment, you are being in presence of God Himself. When the mind, body and soul becomes one, that time the time stops. the time stops and your time with God starts. So that start with the time with God is what everyone wants to, learn and earn. Earn in sense YEARN. So that yearning with for the urge to be with God's blessings is what time itself stops there. At that point of time, the time stops and God's blessing starts ticking by. That moment where your mind, body, and soul with the enlightenment will lead to God's presence and His blessings and His enlightenment and His shower of granting of all your wishes. At that time, your time stops. So there is no any value for time that when God's presence is there. So here in this scenario, the time that is ticking by in the presence of God and you being in the presence of the time that is ticking by and God's presence, if you value the God's presence, if you value the God's presence, then time doesn't tick by, time doesn't pass by, time then and there stops, because God's presence, in God's presence, nothing just moves. Everything stops for God. And when that God's presence is there, His blessings is certainly upon you, and that has to be counted, and that blessings has to be counted, and not the time, because time has stopped in the presence of God Himself. So value the time with God. How do you value the time with God? How do you make a meeting with God? By making your mind, body, and soul as one. How do you make it one? You make it with the purity of mind, purity of your actions, and purity of thoughts. That purity will make you as one entity, and that entity will lead to enlightenment, and that light will guide you towards God's presence. And God's presence is full of blessings, and that blessings will, you with that blessings, the time stops then and there. So that is the inference of the time that is ticking by. God's presence is there, and you yourself, when you are in the presence of God, time stops and nothing else moves, and that moment you value it and enliven and enlighten yourself and others. Thank you.